The finance minister has introduced a proposal in the parliament that will allow the income tax officials to access an individual's virtual digital spaces for their search and seizure operations. Hello and welcome to Drishti IAS. My name is Saloni Nankyoliar, and in this video, we will look at the concerning new provisions of the Income Tax Bill 2025. So this bill talks about expanding the scope of search and seizure operations. Earlier, what used to happen when there was a question of undisclosed income, undisclosed asset or any tax evasion, these income tax officials, they could only search and seize the physical assets of an individual, physical and tangible assets like the house or public spaces, offices or any other thing of that sort. But now the scope has been expanded to include something known as the virtual digital space. And interestingly, this virtual digital space has not been defined anywhere in the bill, which means it can range from anything like your emails to the social media accounts, cloud storage, and any other similar space. So this is the ambiguity here, that the virtual digital spaces have not been clearly defined. In fact, the list is also ever expanding because it talks about something which is known as any other similar space. So it is upon the discretion of the government. The government will decide which space has to be included in this list of virtual digital spaces. And this is a gross violation of anybody's fundamental right to privacy, because now we are entering a very private domain of an individual. All these things contain very private information. In fact, we are not sure how this is going to work on platforms which use end-to-end encryption to protect our data. Whether or not the government will be able to access information that's there on WhatsApp. If yes, what will be the line? So right now it is only talking about the access that the government is getting, but it does not talk about where the line will be drawn and how will our fundamental right to privacy be protected. Then there is no judicial oversight, which means for carrying out these search operations, no mandatory judicial warrant will be required, which again is very concerning because we are expanding the jurisdiction. We are now moving beyond the physical assets. We are entering the personal domain of an individual, but we are not expanding the responsibility. We can carry out all these search operations without any mandatory judicial warrant. So the judicial oversight, judicial review is missing. This is not good for any effective democracy, because a democracy will function effectively only when all the three pillars work in an autonomous manner, which are the legislative, executive and judiciary. Here we are totally missing out on judicial oversight. Then there is no disclosure of reason to believe. So reason to believe used to be a clause earlier also in the Income Tax Act, where in good faith we used to believe that these tax officials, they have a valid reason for conducting these search operations. But now, since we are entering a very personal territory, we have kept the clause as is. So earlier also the taxpayers were not informed about the search operations. They were not informed about the grounds on which these search operations were being conducted. And now also, when the government will have access to such personal information, the taxpayer will not be informed of why this is happening, why the search is being conducted. And imagine how frustrating can this get, that the government has access to all your personal information, but you are not aware of the grounds. So this again is very challenging. And some potential risks here are, number one, that there is an invasion to our privacy. So it is a gross violation of our right to privacy, which is covered under Article 21 of the Constitution. And when we talk about right to privacy, which case comes to your mind? It is the famous Justice case, Puttaswamy case of 2017. In fact, there are two more cases that you should be aware of. One is the MP Sharma case of 1954, and second is the Khadak Singh case of 1962. Why? Because in both these cases, the court had said that right to privacy is not a fundamental right which is protected in the Constitution. But in the Puttaswamy case of 2017, it was made clear that right to privacy is a fundamental right which is protected under Article 21 of our Constitution. And now, if you look at the severity of the situation, when we talk about getting access to social media accounts of an individual or cloud storage of an individual, this information will also have information of other unrelated third party, which means that our social media accounts do not just have information about us. They have information about our family, about our friends, about our co-workers. These are all unrelated parties for the IT officials. So we do not know where this line is going to be drawn, and this again is a violation of their fundamental right of privacy also. So this is the concern with the new provisions of this bill. Then there is also a threat to confidential professions, because there are some professions which are very confidential, very discreet in nature, like the armed forces, the defense forces, and even journalists. So journalists' emails, journalist cloud storage will also have information that is very discreet, which has to be protected at all costs. Now we do not know again what kind of access the government and these IT authorities are going to have. And this information, if it comes out in the public domain, this can also cause major social unrest. There is also gross state overreach here, because the powers of the state are not limited here. They have not been defined. The restrictions have not been defined anywhere in the bill. So it's the classic case of state overreach. And then there is a lot of ambiguity, because we do not know the reason to believe. The definition of virtual digital spaces are not clearly mentioned. So it is all very open-ended and ambiguous. So when we talk about the legal and constitutional perspective, it is a violation of a right to privacy. Then it fails the proportionality test. The proportionality test came into picture with the Puttaswamy case, where for any government action to violate a fundamental right, it should have to pass the proportionality test, which contains 4 provisions. So the aim has to be legal in nature, legal and constitutional in nature, the legality of aim. It has to be rational and logical in nature. There has to be an absolute necessity to perform this operation, which means that we have already exhausted all our less restrictive options, and this is the only option that we have for public good. So in the legality of the aim, we also verify that this has to be for the greater good of the general public. And in balancing, we have to make sure that our profit outweighs our loss. There are more pros than the cons. It is serving the national good, it is serving the general good. But these provisions, these new provisions of the income tax bill, they fail the proportionality test here. There are no safeguards, and it is against the past judicial interpretations, as we already discussed. It is against the Puttaswamy case of 2017. There are some other shortcomings also, which are that this is opaque in nature. We do not know what kind of access the government is going to have, how much access the government is going to have, these IT officials are going to have. So it's very opaque in nature, and we're talking about entering anybody's personal space, personal domain. So it's a very critical contention point here. Then there is no discrimination between the financial and non-financial stuff here. So when we talk about the social media accounts or our cloud storage, it is going to have financial and non-financial data. Financial data will include bank accounts, but non-financial information like our photos, our videos, these are non-financial information which are not relevant to the IT officials. So how is this going to be decided? What kind of information, what kind of access these IT officials are going to have? This again is not very clear. And then there is no redressal mechanism that has been talked about in these provisions. So when anybody's fundamental right has been violated incorrectly, if somebody, an innocent, is suffering because of all these, who is going to deal with that? Who is going to deal with the grievance of that individual? That has also not been defined anywhere in these provisions. So these are some major challenges and shortcomings here. And the way forward right now is that this is under review with a select committee. So this select committee needs to work in a neutral manner. It needs to analyze everything in question. It needs to analyze the right to privacy, the fundamental right here in question, and also needs to draw a line, a boundary as to how much information the government can have and what it cannot have. So the stakeholders here are two. The citizens are also stakeholder, and the government is also the stakeholder. So we as citizens also need to understand that because the crimes have gone digital, the enforcement will also need to go digital. So we do not completely want to do away with the digital enforcement, but it should be rooted in the 4 principles of proportionality that we already discussed. So it should not be absurd in nature. It has to pass the proportionality test. This is what the select committee here should do. And then there should be judicial oversight, which is missing right now. Since the jurisdiction has increased, so should the responsibility, and judicial overview should not be done away with. So these are some things, this is the way forward that we need to have, the government needs to follow, so that the right, the fundamental right is also not violated and digital enforcement is also mandated. So that was all for today's video. Let us see what happens with this bill, what kind of proposals are accepted and what are rejected. But that is all for now. And now let us look at a practice question for prelims. With reference to the Income Tax Bill 2025 recently introduced in the Parliament, consider the following statements. 1. The bill seeks to expand search and seizure powers of tax authorities to include an individual's virtual digital space. 2. The bill mandates prior judicial approval before accessing digital devices. And 3. The phrase any other space of similar nature used in the bill makes the scope of digital access open-ended. Which of the statements is or are correct? A. 1 and 3 only, B. 3 only, C. 1 and 2 only, D. 2. Please provide your answers in the comment section, and until we meet the next time, please keep studying and keep revising.
For more informative content, like, share and subscribe, and do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.